Late at night, under the eerie glow of the streetlights, Emily Carter, a 17-year-old girl with a fascination for antiques, walked home from her evening class. A cold wind howled through the empty streets as she wrapped her arms around herself. Just as she was about to turn the corner, something caught her eye, a small, dusty mirror lying on the sidewalk. The glass was flawless, and on its frame, there was a sticker with the words, "Free," scribbled in red ink. Curiosity tugged at her. Emily glanced around, ensuring no one was watching, then picked up the mirror and tucked it into her bag. A strange shiver ran down her spine, but she ignored it and hurried home, unaware of the ominous energy now following her. Inside her dimly lit bedroom, she placed the mirror on her vanity. As she gazed into it, a smile formed on her lips. "So beautiful, so beautiful," she whispered, mesmerized by her reflection. It felt as if the mirror were whispering back to her, praising her beauty. The words echoed in her mind, drowning out the real world. Her head felt light, her vision slightly hazy, as if she were slipping into a dreamlike trance. The air around her turned dense, suffocating. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was her mother. Emily reached out to answer, but her fingers froze mid-air. Her reflection in the mirror did not move. It stared at her with a knowing, sinister smile. A chill shot through Emily's body. The phone continued to ring, but she couldn't look away. The ringing stopped. A heavy silence settled in the room. A whisper, faint yet chilling, slithered through the air. "Stay with me forever," Emily gasped, stepping back. The lights flickered, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Goosebumps covered her skin as her breath turned into mist. Then she noticed something horrifying. The reflection in the mirror was no longer just her. Behind her, inside the mirror's glass, shadowy figures lurked, their hollow eyes fixated on her, their mouths moving soundlessly. Emily turned around abruptly. There was nothing. But when she looked back at the mirror, the figures were closer. One of them raised a hand, its skeletal fingers pressing against the glass as if trying to break through. The figures began to whisper in unison, their voices like a chilling symphony. "Come with us. Come with us." Emily clutched her head, her vision blurring. It felt as though her mind was being pulled into the mirror. She stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The room was suddenly bathed in darkness, save for the eerie glow coming from the mirror's surface. Her reflection started to change. Her eyes darkened, her features twisted into something grotesque. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her body felt paralyzed. Moments later, there was a loud knock on her bedroom door. "Emily, open the door!" Her mother's frantic voice called. But Emily remained still, her eyes locked onto the mirror. The knocking turned to pounding, and then a loud crack echoed as the lock shattered. Her mother rushed in. Emily's body was standing before the mirror, but her eyes were vacant. The mirror's surface shimmered strangely, like liquid glass. Then in an instant, Emily disappeared, vanished inside the mirror. Her mother screamed and rushed forward, gripping her daughter's shoulders, shaking her. Then, she too froze. Her eyes widened in horror as her reflection smiled back at her, even though she wasn't smiling. She tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy, as if something were pulling her in. A low whisper filled the room, an eerie voice that didn't belong to either of them. "Join us, join us." Suddenly, her mother saw movement within the mirror's depths, a horrifying version of Emily, her eyes black. Her face twisted into a grotesque grin emerged from the glass. This wasn't her daughter. It was something else entirely. It reached out, gripping Emily's mother's wrist with an icy, vice-like hold. The room quaked as an invisible force dragged her forward. She clawed at the floor, desperate to resist, but it was useless. The last thing Emily's mother saw was the horrifying reflection of herself being yanked into darkness. The room fell, silent. The mirror, now darker, reflected nothing but a void, waiting for its next victim. The next morning, the Carter house was eerily silent. The breakfast table was untouched, the chairs left askew as if someone had left in a hurry. Emily's phone lay on her bed, buzzing with missed calls from her friends. The house smelled of something stale, something unnatural. The only thing untouched was the mirror. Its surface was smooth, polished, and empty, yet it pulsed faintly, as if it were alive. A faint laughter echoed within it, the sound barely audible, but enough to send chills down the spine of anyone who dared to listen. The mirror had claimed its victims, but it was not satisfied. It would never be satisfied. A week passed, and the Carter house remained empty. Concerned neighbors reported the family missing, and soon the police arrived to investigate. Officers searched every room, finding no trace of Emily or her mother. However, one officer was drawn to the mirror. Something about its pristine surface was unnerving, almost too perfect. He leaned closer, adjusting his cap. As he peered in, his breath caught in his throat. For a brief second, he swore he saw Emily's face within the reflection, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. He stumbled back, his heart pounding. "What the hell was that?" he muttered under his breath. Another officer, hearing his colleague's unease, approached. "You okay?" The first officer hesitated before shaking his head. Yeah, I'm fine. Must be my imagination." But it wasn't. The mirror pulsed again, unseen by them. That night, the police department logged the Carter case as an unexplained disappearance. But deep within the darkness of the mirror, Emily and her mother were still trapped, lost in a nightmarish world, surrounded by the whispering shadows. Their reflections still roamed the house, waiting for someone else to pick up the mirror and gaze into its cursed depths. The trap was set, the game was far from over. The void within the mirror was endless. Emily and her mother floated in darkness, their bodies weightless yet bound by an unseen force. Whispers filled the air, hissing voices calling their names. Emily turned, her eyes adjusting to the dim glow of something ahead. A twisted version of her bedroom, only distorted. Its angles unnatural, its colors wrong. The walls pulsed like breathing flesh, and shadows moved on their own. The mirror had not just taken them. It had imprisoned them in a world beyond reality. Her mother clutched Emily's arm, her voice trembling. "We need to get out. Now." A low growl echoed from the corners of the warped room. The shadows coiled together, forming grotesque figures with hollow eyes and elongated limbs. Their mouths stretched unnaturally wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. They moved toward Emily and her mother, their bodies gliding soundlessly over the ground. Panic surged through Emily. She grabbed her mother's hand and ran. They sprinted through the ever-changing labyrinth of the mirror world, doors appearing and vanishing, corridors twisting upon themselves. The deeper they ran, the more distorted their surroundings became. They passed floating furniture, reflections that moved independently, and walls that whispered secrets from beyond. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing against them like an invisible force. The shadows pursued relentlessly, their whispers growing into screeches. The hallway ahead twisted violently, elongating like a serpent coiling in on itself. Emily and her mother stopped, panting. A massive chasm yawned open in the floor, filled with writhing figures, their distorted faces stretching into silent screams. The figures resembled people-trapped souls, clawing for escape. Emily gasped, recognizing a face among them, an old neighbor who had mysteriously vanished years ago. Her stomach lurched. A whisper slithered through the air. "Stay with us forever." The grotesque figures lunged. Emily yanked her mother backward, barely dodging their clawed fingers. The world trembled as the walls began to crack, revealing more darkness beyond. Then Emily saw Ida faint shimmer, a crack in the darkness, a way out. Hope flared in her chest. "Over there," she cried, dragging her mother toward the glowing fissure. But before they could reach it, the mirror world, Emily emerged from the shadows, her grin stretching unnaturally wide. "You can't leave," she whispered. "You belong to us now." Her reflection raised a hand and the walls pulsed in response. The shadow creatures convulsed, their forms twisting, multiplying. Hands erupted from the walls, clawing toward them. Emily and her mother stumbled backward, but the hands gripped their ankles, their arms. pulling them down into the abyss. The darkness thickened around them, swallowing them whole. Emily felt an icy grip on her throat as the shadows coiled tighter. Her mother's terrified screams mixed with hers, but they sounded distant, distorted as if already fading from existence. The figures in the chasm below stretched their hands toward them, their hollow eyes filled with eternal despair. The mirror world began shifting again, the walls folding over one another, the corridors twisting into an endless maze. Emily's vision blurred as a strange force pressed against her chest, suffocating her. She tried to resist, but it was like sinking into a bottomless ocean of darkness. Then, something changed. A faint hum echoed through the void. A flicker of light, small, almost imperceptible, formed above them. Emily's consciousness wavered as the light grew brighter. It pulsed in rhythmic waves, pushing back the encroaching shadows. The ghostly figures recoiled, their shrieks piercing the air. Emily forced her eyes open. Above her, the crack in the mirror world ceiling widened, golden light pouring through. Was it an exit? Or another trick? Her mother's grip tightened around her hand. "Emily, look!" The shadow Emily shrieked in fury. "No, you can't leave. You are part of us now." The walls convulsed, the mirror world twisting violently. The shadow creatures lunged, their elongated fingers stretching toward them. But the golden light flared, blasting through the darkness. The creatures recoiled, their forms unraveling like threads caught in a storm. The pull of the abyss weakened, and for the first time Emily felt her body becoming lighter, as if something was lifting her away from the nightmare. With a final desperate effort, Emily reached toward the golden fissure, dragging her mother with her. The force of the light wrapped around them, pulling them upward. The shadow Emily let out a final scream, her form disintegrating as the mirror world collapsed in on itself. Emily gasped, her body jerking violently as she crashed onto the floor. She blinked rapidly, her lungs heaving as if she had been drowning. Cold air rushed against her skin. She was back. She turned, seeing her mother beside her, equally shaken but alive. The mirror stood in front of them, its surface no longer reflective. Instead, it was cracked, the glass spider-webbed with fractures, and behind those cracks, the shadowy figures, howled in rage, trapped forever. Emily reached out a trembling hand, but before she could touch it, the mirror shattered completely, its pieces disintegrating into dust. Silence. The nightmare was over, or so they thought. As they stood, shaken and exhausted, Emily caught a flicker of movement from the corner of her eye. The dust from the mirror swirled unnaturally, forming words on the wooden floor. "We are not done yet." The room grew deathly cold. The whispers returned. The laughter had not truly faded, for now the mirror was gone, but something else had taken its place.